Venom computers. This is Intelligent Performance.
Welcome to the Intelligent Performance Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. And today we welcome the coach Josh Wood, a specialist in the area of nutrition, and here to tell us why you might have lost control of your waistband and what we can do about it for ourselves and also for the next generation, and how really they're counting on us to turn things around. So Josh, an absolute pleasure to welcome you on the show. You've got global expertise in the area of nutrition. You've just done a TED Talk at TED Talk Hobart, all about this kind of nutrition and how, you know, this global epidemic that we're facing around obesity. I think your first stat was like 1 billion people are dealing with this issue. So Josh, thanks so much for being here. It's awesome to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So with all our guests, Josh, we asked the question, what's your take on intelligent performance, given that that's very much what we're fascinated by in terms of this show?
It's an interesting question because I've worked with a number of performance athletes in a range of domains, and performance always comes down to understanding what you need to do, but probably even more so understanding what you don't need to do. This is the thing. It's so
true.
It's just so funny how everyone thinks they need to do all these amazing, crazy things for whatever domain, whether it's public speaking or it's, athletic performance. People think they have to do all these things. And it's usually a matter of cutting out the useless, cutting out the fluff that looks cool on social media, but is absolutely, if not just a waste of your time, actively detrimental to doing the best at whatever your domain is. So if I were to say anything, it's learning how to filter out the useless.
What a great way to look at it. I feel that's brilliant, actually. I love that definition, Josh. Probably one of the better one we've had, because I think it's so right. I come across it like a self-development perspective, and where people often think they have to kind of like beat themselves to death, and it's like the equivalent of like cutting down a tree to try and get it to grow. And it's like, no, that's not actually how you grow or develop as a person. So yeah, it's really fascinating you say that. And I feel like it's super appropriate given what we're talking about in terms of nutrition, because like, if you log on to Instagram, I've deleted Instagram now because it's just so hectic on there. But it's like you're just drowning in information, you're drowning in diets, you're drowning in opinions, you're drowning in whatever. Like, and if you haven't got a ice bath, a sauna, if you haven't got cupping and blah blah blah, you're not doing that as a basic, and that's just before 5 a.m. You're clearly doing it wrong, right? So just tell us, what's been your journey in this space? How have you kind of arrived to this? It's better to, what was your words? Take away the useless.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sort of like the anti-food dogma, anti-fad coach. Like, I see something new come up, and I've done this in my own podcast and other interviews where I've kind of called out like the ice bath culture. And everyone's like, oh, it's this, it's that, it's going to make you the toughest person around. And then you get these groups of guys who go out and they sit in a frozen lake and they're all holding hands and they're like, yeah, this is the toughest thing ever. It's like, yeah, it's tough, man. It's cool. It's not going to change your life. And more often than not, it's this like, it's this idea of like, we need this like little adrenaline boost that gets us going, and people go, oh my God, I just feel so much more energetic. And, I just feel ready for the day. And I'm like, that's an adrenaline boost. Like, you know what else will give you that? A slap in the face. You could easily swap out daily ice baths for a daily slap in the face, and you're probably gonna get the same benefits. Now, this is not talking about the anti-inflammatory benefits of cold exposure, but the idea that we need to do this ritual of pain to start our day. More often than not, I see it as there's a gap in someone's life, and they're trying to fill it with some sort of suffering that they're giving meaning to. And it's like, if you just go out and do hard things that have purpose, you'll fill that gap, and you'll actually get something done aside from just getting cold. So I've been in the industry 13 years now. And, I started in massage, and I ran a massage practice and taught that for a number of years in Melbourne. And I just, in every aspect of this, whether it's my work in manual therapies or my personal, like my own training in combat sports, and then of course, being heavily involved with social media for a long time, I just see so much nonsense. And people are like, yes, this is going to be the thing that changes my life. This is the nonsense that's so important. And I'm like, have you tried sleeping for at least 8 hours? Do you ever go outside? Do you drink water? Do you get enough protein? Like, no, I've joined this group and we run over broken glass at 6 a.m. every day. And then we do burpees on Legos. And I'm like, just get some sleep. Guaranteed it'll change your life. Like, it's just nonsense. And I just see it so much. And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Just, if you need purpose in your life, you could do better than this.
Oh, that is some truth bombs you're spilling here, Josh. This is cool, man. I like it. Look, I'm with you. I think it's so bang on, because we often feature people who've come up with some sort of fad, right? And that's great, and it's very interesting to hear about their perspective. But I think these days, if we're really real, there's very little which is new, right? And new seems to be like we're all hunting the secret for some weird reason. Like, we think that if we don't know, well, there must be a secret. Like, we're so smart. We obviously know everything. And so we're obviously missing just this small piece of information, which is going to transform my life and hopefully my waistline. So tell us about this obesity issue. What are you seeing in terms of, you've just done an epic TED Talk down in Hobart. Thanks to Theo for linking us up. In terms of your take on this, there's 1 billion people, I think is your statistic, that are dealing with this, not just fat, we're talking like obese, right? Which is big. If you look at the US, also, we're certainly, I don't think we're behind, maybe we're even ahead in Australia, but what's your take on it, Josh, in terms of what's the issue, let's say, first of all, in terms of the scale?
Well, the scale is daunting. There was a study that came out in March this year. I think it was in March, might have been April, but there was a study that came out, I believe it was through the Lancet, and the WHO puts out obesity statistics regularly. And basically what we see now is that obesity and being overweight is now a bigger problem on the World Health scale than hunger is. We grew up talking about, starving kids in this country and that country, and what we have now is that more people are overweight, more people are obese, and it's something like 37 million kids under 5 worldwide are overweight or obese. Under 5, like, come on, like, this is not their fault. This is the fault of two big things: the environment, the food environment, but more so the parents, because we don't have a big say in the environment, but we have a big say in how we interact with it. And kids don't have that choice. And so I was looking at these statistics and I'm like, who can stop this from happening? Who can change this? It's the parents. It's our fault. If our kids grow up overweight and obese, that is our fault. Yes, we can say, well, it's harder to get them outside, and, we don't have a lot of good food around us. It's like, yeah, but you still have a choice. You can do better. And so my TEDx talk was very much about calling this out, but not just complaining about it, but providing some actionable steps to get people to make a change in their own life and set that example for their kids or, anyone that's looking up to them. Because it doesn't have to be your kids. Like, obviously we have the biggest influence over our own children, but, their friends, our friends, our community. If we're in a management or authority position in work or in politics, well, that's another thing too. But that's, people look up to us and they see what we do. When we see successful people, whether it's successful in health or performance or business, we go, what are they doing that I'm not? And I think that people in those positions have a responsibility to set a minimum standard of an example for health and wellness. And, just a bit of a tangent there. This is something I've been barking about a lot, is politicians. They're in the public eye, and I think they should have a minimum sort of health and fitness standard.
Interesting. I like that. That's, if we haven't got a headline on that one, that would be contentious.
Yeah.
It's going to be a real leadership conundrum, I think, because the issue's right at the top, isn't it? And I feel I'm just going to come back to the word daunting. You mentioned a moment ago. I feel that's an interesting one, right? Because you're right, and I shared with you just before we came on that I was watching your TEDx talk, and I got two Hungry Jack, which for those who are in the American audience is Burger King equivalent down under, and I got two adverts within the first minute of watching your talk, which is about obesity, and I thought that was like, it really talks about the issue that you're up against, right?
Yeah.
And the burgers looked amazing. I'm gluten and lactose intolerant, so I haven't touched Hungry Jack's burger for many years.
Right.
But even then, even despite knowing the impact it has on my body, it certainly looks tantalizing. It certainly looks like, that looks like a quote unquote good idea. How do you combat that? Because that's really, there's the people part. But I feel like that's in many ways what you're up against, right?
Yeah, and that's what we'd call like the food environment, like the local availability of food and the pressures put on people. Advertising makes everything look good, but if you listen to my talk, one of the things in there, one of the 6 habits to eat like an adult is good enough. You don't need perfect. You just need something that's good enough. And I'm not anti-burger. This is the thing, as people like, if I have a palm-sized portion of meat on my plate, a little side salad, and a dinner roll, people are like, yeah, that's pretty good. You stack them on top of each other. That's a hamburger. And for some reason, that's now the least healthy option. No, it's not. It's not terrible, but rarely does someone just get a cheeseburger. It's the burger, it's the fries, it's the soda, it's the dessert, the ice cream, all the extra sauces. Like, even just getting a burger isn't normal.
Sure.
So it's a combination of our habits. It's a combination of the psychology of marketing and how people react to certain things. Like for 50 cents more, you can get a large drink and a large fry. It's like, well, that's a good deal. And then you're like, well, I don't want to waste this. And a good example is my grandpa. He grew up very, very poor in rural Minnesota. He had 10 siblings. And if you didn't eat what was on your plate, you don't get to eat. And that habit from his childhood carried him into adulthood. Whatever was on the plate got eaten. If there was food, you ate it. And he became obese and he gave himself type 2 diabetes. And these habits that carry on these behaviors into adulthood. Got to eat what's on my plate. Oh, it's a better deal if I get a little bit more. Like these things that we get from our parents and our childhood environment might not serve us, usually don't serve us. And a big point in my talk is like, how do we recognize, then break that pattern and then introduce a new one, which is very, very hard. The first part is looking at that and going, should I do this? Do I need that burger? Oh, a burger is not so bad. It's probably good enough. But do I need the fries? Do I need the drink? Do I need to upsize them?
So talk us through that habit breaking piece, right? Especially because I think there's a whole mix here, right? We've all been searching for a secret, searching for some sort of special recipe which is going to fix our lives. As you talked about the connection, like the lack of purpose, which the Western world, I think we've got. Yeah. If you want to talk about epidemics, there's an epidemic around purpose and what the hell we're doing, and it's just about trying to get a bit more money than what you've got, or something like that version. It's become competitive against our colleagues who, also have no purpose. So in terms of there's a bit going on here, right? And then we're using food to satisfy that. Sometimes it's just an activity. Sometimes it's a way of dealing with stress. How do you think we could combat a bunch of this?
Man, that's a big question. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. The first thing is figuring out our values, figuring out our central axis of understanding. Good examples is in a relationship. So my wife and I have recently had a very good talk about this. It's like, well, what are our values as in our relationship, in our family? And it's like, well, first and foremost, we want to raise healthy, capable, confident children. We got 2 young boys. And it's like, well, everything is based on that then. We have a central axis of understanding of what everything else is based on. But like you said, if you have a lack of purpose, if you don't know what you're trying to do, then you can't make good decisions based around that. Anything that you do is habitual or spontaneous. And until you've sat down and gone, okay, this is what's important to me. I need to set an example for the people around me. I want to be capable so I can better help the people in my family and my community. Well, that means I have to make certain decisions. I can't just feed my feelings. I can't just do what is most enjoyable in the moment. I have to understand that there will be sacrifices if I want to have a certain outcome. And I think people are inherently terrified of the idea that they have to give up something enjoyable, that they have to sacrifice something. But every decision we make, especially the good ones, is a sacrifice. I need to be in bed by 9 o'clock tonight. That means I can't stay up and watch my favorite show. Gee, sorry, but if the outcome is you want to actually feel good in life and be capable of doing the things you need to do, that is the sacrifice you have to make. But you can only continuously and consistently make those sacrifices if you understand your core values, if you understand the axis of reference for everything. But as a culture, like you said, we don't really have that. We have subcultures, a lot of communities, a lot of families understand their values. But as an overall culture, the culture is primarily, well, make money. And it's makes us very susceptible to marketing and to influence if we don't understand that. It is a big empire of commercialism. You know, there's no central tenets of value except for, you know, typical Western liberal values, you know, freedom of speech, let people do what they need to do as adults, that consents and don't bother other people. And that's about it. But those are freedoms, not so much duties, which change things.
It's interesting. I think on Father's Day, I went to church and they talked about discipline. And it was probably the first time in a public environment I'd heard discipline talked about.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think what comes through to me in terms of what you're saying is that we just lack discipline, period. Right? In fact, discipline is kind of, we said, like, it's almost like it's not required, and we try and convince people it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
In terms of eating, you know, like their guidelines, they're not like, you know, this is how you should roll. You know, in the biblical context, they talked about commandments. They weren't, you know, ideas. It was like
suggestions.
Yeah, like maybe thought bubbles. You know, like it was very clear in terms of you know, the intention there. So, what's your take? Because it feels like, and maybe you could share a little bit more about the other 5 rules around eating like an adult, because I think they're really powerful as well. Is, you know, what's the role of discipline, and why do you think? Is it marketed? Is it because have we tried to like dissuade people that discipline's not important, and that, you know, because I feel like when you do become a dad, when you hit parenthood, all of a sudden you are starting to ask those interesting questions of, well, hang on a second, what role model am I being here? It's no longer just about me, you know, my waistline or my behavioral habits, but it's also like, yeah, okay, am I going to demonstrate that, you know, on Saturday morning we get up and do some exercise, or we just lay in bed and do whatever? Like it starts to challenge your thinking, right? So yeah. What's your take on that?
Well, I think in that case, as parents, like it's the first time we really have something outside ourselves to worry about. I was on another podcast, a fatherhood podcast a couple weeks back, called the Cool Dad Collective. And we had a little chat about this. And we're just like, man, what did we do with our time before we had kids? Like, you know, if I'm lucky, I get 30 minutes to an hour for myself during the day at night when everyone else is in bed. And it's basically, do I sit and read or do I just go straight to sleep? And we're like, how did we spend our time? Like, what did we do when we actually had all of our time? We got to work and our money was just ours to spend. And after work, you didn't have anybody to worry about except yourself and your partner. And you just kind of, what'd you do? And it's like, as soon as you have kids, you're like, you have a very concrete, very demanding point of reference. You have another human whose entire existence depends on you. And for a lot of people, that's the first time they've had real responsibility, which requires discipline to manage. Because you can't just freeball it. Like, you gotta actually put in some thought and effort to make this person's life good. And yeah, man, it's usually that big wake up call. And a lot of people who've not had a lot of responsibility haven't already dialed in their priorities in life, find that, and they're like, oh, like, what's happening? What do I do? Oh my gosh, the chaos. And that was a talk we had on the other podcast as well. It's just like, before that happens, you need to know what you're about. You need to know your priorities. You need to know what you're planning on doing when you come into parenthood. Not like, you're not going to learn the skills, but like, what is your focus? Why are you doing this in the first place? And it's the same thing in culture, like that parents have a different perspective because they have a very different set of values and a different set of responsibilities. And parents get that. I talk to other parents and they're like, oh yeah, like, I have to do these things. I have to make these things happen. But people people who aren't parents will be like, I'll just do whatever. And discipline is usually second string to anything else. It's usually about just enjoying stuff, which is cool. That'd be nice. I'd like to just enjoy stuff again, but at the same time, you can't. And that forces a level of discipline, and it forces a level of introspection, and it forces a level of time management and prioritization. And without that kind of thing in your life, you have to have some sort of event, some sort of trigger in your life that makes you go, I need to get my shit together. Like, I need to start focusing on making myself do the things that are good for me. And until that happens, there is no cultural call to doing better through work. There's no cultural call to discipline. It's sort of a dirty word, and it's just sort of in the fringes of the ex-Navy SEAL motivational speaker crowd who get the middle-aged white-collar guys and take them out and beat them for a weekend to instill discipline, and they pay $40,000 for the experience and think it's the best thing that's ever happened to them. It's like, come on, guys! Like, this is just ice baths on crack. Like, you could find real purpose outside of these events.
So funny. It's funny. I'm just looking at the definition of discipline: the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. Yeah, it's interesting, right? I feel like that's not necessarily what people are actually talking about.
No, but to an extent, it is. It's about a code of behavior. It's about your non-negotiables in life, and again, punishment. Bad word. Shouldn't say it. It gives you bad feelings. But we punish ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it because they lack discipline. Well, I need to go to the gym and work extra hard because I can't control what I eat. Or, I went out drinking on the weekend and now I need to not eat anything for the next 2 days, or whatever it is. They punish themselves. They do. They just don't want to call it that. And they do it because they don't have discipline, because they don't have a motivation to discipline. But when you sort of go like, this is what I need to do with my life, this is what I want, I'm going to do the things that lead there. The punishment is disappointing yourself when you step off that path, or the fact that the punishment is, I just lost an extra 2 hours of sleep and I'm going to feel like garbage for the next 2 days. That's punishment enough in a lot of cases. I think punishment gets a bad word, but if you put it in the right context, it's just the natural repercussions that happen from decisions.
Yeah, it's an interesting. These words, right, are ones which people avoid. Especially, I see in Parenthood, like when you're at the play park, like we've taken a very proactive stance with training our kids around something called Triple P. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's a methodology around parenting. It's called the Positive Parenting Program, I think it is. Yep. Free to Queenslanders. Actually, it's very inexpensive nationally. And research based in terms of like how to basically how to communicate. Actually, it's fundamentally a communication program for adults, which is framed as a parenting thing to get your kids to behave. But ultimately, kids behave better when you get clear communication from your parents consistently.
Yep.
And it's fascinating to see the impact on that versus other children. And when we hang out with other parents, where there's no, as you say, punishment or no clarity to the kid about what's right and what's wrong behavior, or what's kind of preferred, then there's just kind of like complete free-for-all. And it's tricky because we're in that context where we got kids doing whatever they want, running around and, you know, running through car parks and stuff like that, where we're super like, no, in car parks, it's not a play zone. We'll get to the play zone, but in the car parks, we're here. It's tricky because our kids they look at the other kids and they go, well, why do I, you know, have to do this? And, you know, versus the wild kids over there, as it were. And that's a tricky conundrum, right? Because I think there's also that uncomfortableness, like, oh, you know, are we being too overtly, you know, tough-handed or heavy-handed with our kids just because they listen when we talk, you know, like,
yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting how I feel like Western society, largely speaking, or maybe I can only speak from my own experiences, we've become really soft from that. Like we've kind of like really moved away from any of that. Maybe as a reaction where we've all come from post-war families where it's been like super heavy-handed. So maybe from that.
The pendulum swings,
right?
But we've kind of moved. I mean, think about like parents from the 80s and 90s, like the helicopter parents and all the participation awards, and like everything was just about safety and protection and making sure everyone feels good. And I think people are moving back into an understanding of not just that boundaries are essential, but that they actually are beneficial. And back to punishment, you know, that's one of those things that we can also reframe. And the terminology we use in our house is consequences. You know, everything has natural consequences.
Absolutely.
If you run face first into the wall is not punishing you, but there is a consequence of your actions, and it's your face hurts. But it seems societally, people are constantly running their face into the wall and getting mad about the fact that it hurts. Why can't I just eat whatever I want and feel great all the time? Why do I have to exercise? It's hard. And it makes me feel bad. And it's easier just to sit around, do nothing and eat garbage and just purely entertain myself. You know what? You can do that. You're an adult, but it has consequences. And if you're an adult with children, the consequences fall on them. And so, you know, if you want to live that way, you're forcing them to reap the consequences, not just yourself. So it's, you know, you can call it punishment or you can call it consequences.
Yes, it's a very powerful reframe. So let's, Josh, I want to talk about the 6 rules to eating like an adult. And then I really want to finish up with prioritization, because I think you've got some really, in terms of counterintuitive thinking, which is what we're really big on here on the Intelligent Performance podcast, is I think your take on prioritization is really interesting. And it's actually not what it appears. So just talk us through the 6 rules quickly. How do you kind of think about these types of things?
Yeah, so the 6 rules or 6 habits to eat like an adult is really about introducing a conscious element to our behaviors around food. You know, everything we do is mostly unconscious. We eat what we find convenient or what we grew up eating. We rarely try new things or new ways of eating. Our relationship with food is mostly unconscious. And so the idea is like, here are some things that you can do to either reframe or introduce consciousness to your food decisions. And then the first one, and the one that I get the most positive feedback about, is the apple test. An apple test is essentially if you are, you know, it's 10 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, you're digging around your snack drawer in your desk, or you're in the pantry trying to find something to eat, you know, are you even hungry? If Coach Josh was to magically show up next to you with a ripe, beautiful Tasmanian apple, would you eat it? And the idea is, well, if you are hungry, you would eat the apple, assuming you like apples. It could be any fruit, but if that was offered to you and you'd eat it, cool, you're hungry. Then go ahead and eat an apple. But if you're like, no, I just really want the Tim Tams. Well, you're not actually hungry then. You're dealing with something else. Maybe you need just a bit more water, or you're not eating a nutritious diet across the board, or you're stressed, or you're tired, and you're managing those feelings through snacking. So that's probably the biggest one for actually breaking a current habit and introducing something else. I get messages all the time. You see it on the YouTube video comments. People are like, I literally just carry apples around now. and I've lost X amount of weight, or I find I'm actually just not very hungry. I just want to snack on stuff. I was like, great, that's the whole idea. I have heard, I've seen another coach online who was trying to reframe that as the broccoli test. Just ask yourself, I'm like, nobody's going to do that. Even if I'm hungry, I'd rather not eat than munch on raw broccoli. Like, this is terrible. But I love apples. So there's that. It's one of my favorite foods, especially in Tasmania. Understanding that, like we mentioned before, like good enough is good enough. This idea that it doesn't have to be perfect. If you're out to eat and you look at the menu and it's not the perfect meal, like, don't throw it all out the window just because there's not something perfect. Just do something that's good enough. Get a bit of extra protein, enjoy your meal. A burger, perfect example. It's fine, but just lay off all the sides and drinks and things. It's usually the liquid calories that are an issue. Choose better. Choose better is another one. It's again along the same vein as good enough is good enough, but choosing something slightly better. Every time you do that, eventually you're going to arrive at a place that is good. And so it's like, if you're thirsty, you don't need a liter of Coke. If you want a Coke, fine, get a small one, enjoy that, and then drink some water. But don't say it's because you're thirsty. And every time you make these little tiny swaps, not upsizing stuff, not getting the large chips, just get a medium. This little bit of choosing better every time, that stair steps. And that creates a completely different outcome in 6 months or a year. But it starts with just choosing a little bit better. Treats or treats. Treats or treats is the big one. I get a lot of responses about that after the TEDx event, people coming up to me and mentioning, I don't think I have treats. And the idea is that if you are treating yourself to something the same time each day or same time each week, that's not a treat. That's your diet. Because a treat is a reward. It's a special or enjoyable event or occasion that is earned, or it's special. It's an uncommon or a rare occurrence. A treat isn't a daily thing. You don't get a treat for existing. You don't get a treat for going to work, that you are just self-medicating with food. Which is fine, but as soon as you recognize that, you have power over it. Don't eat your emotions. That's easier said than done. But every time you choose to eat your emotions, which most people do through quote treats, you are making it harder to manage in the long run. And as soon as you recognize that you're doing that, and it's usually through recognition of treats being just actually what you eat, what your diet is. A packet of Tim Tams is part of your diet. Once you start recognizing that, you can start looking at why do I have to manage my emotions this way? Why do I have to eat my emotions? What is really going on? How can I create a healthier coping mechanism? And then just the understanding that mistakes will always happen. I get I do food journals with all my new clients. And every once in a while, I'll see like, sorry, I ate a whole pizza and a bucket of wings. And it's like, well, why? He's like, I had social engagement, this thing for work. And I was like, so how many wings does it take to be social? Like, how many slices of pizza allows you to be social? Like, that's just an excuse. But when we use those excuses to throw everything out the window because, I've already had 2 wings, I might as well eat the whole bucket. We're not learning from them, but understanding that mistakes will happen, acknowledging them, seeing them as speed bumps, that allows us to then do better next time. But if we use the excuse that like it was outside our control, well, it was a special event and we were all out with the team. It's like, no one made you eat anything. Calories cannot legally enter your body without your consent. Like, you just acknowledge it, understand you made a mistake, and then pick up where you left off. Just start again. Don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. Acknowledge it. Do better.
Very powerful. Very powerful. Like, and it's what I'm hearing in that is very like zero shame. Like I feel like we carry a lot around like shame. I often know, when I've spoken to people or been on a diet myself, you break it, you do think something like, oh my God, I've dropped out of ketosis or something like that. And like,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like it's an event,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. There's a time and a place to feel shame,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's not because you accidentally ate a little bit too much. The shame should be felt that you're not dealing with that.
Mm.
You should feel ashamed that you can't acknowledge that. But if you can acknowledge the issue and put in place systems to change it in the future, that's a win.
For sure. No, I love that. Really powerful, Josh. Really powerful. Talk to us about prioritization, because I feel like that's the word for it, but I don't necessarily think it's actually what you mean. Because I think, and this comes right back to what we started with, everyone, you look at Instagram, when it comes to dieting, with the latest fad, whatever, if you haven't got the sauna, the ice bath, the swimming pool, if you're not doing 20 minutes of breathing, you're doing the yoga class and and as you say, kind of doing those $40,000 retreats where they kind of beat to a shred.
Yeah.
You're doing something fundamentally wrong. So,
yeah. I mean,
how can we kind of give something people really practical at this stage?
The people I work with are people who are really time poor. They're parents and they're professionals, business owners, things like that. And so they're in the group of people who are like, I need to do as little as possible to get the most out of it. So I've had a lot of practice working with this, and everything comes down to prioritization. Everything comes down to what is it you're trying to achieve? You need to know your goal and you need to know what motivates you. Or I need to know that, because then I can keep you on track. But if you have a goal and if you understand why you want that goal, I worked with a lady once who she joined a weight loss challenge that I was running. And her motivation was obviously to lose weight. It was a significant amount of weight. It was like 20, 30 kilos. Because she was so embarrassed about how she looked. She was not in any family photos with her children.
Wow. And
I'm just like, that's devastating. That's terrible. Like, holy man, like how can you go through life like that? And once you understand what you want and then what's driving you, then you can prioritize. Then you can say, here are all the things I don't need to do. And I think it was Nassim Taleb who wrote Anti-Fragile and Black Swan and Skin in the Game. He's an economist, and he said that like intelligence isn't what you can pick up. It's about your ability to filter out the useless, and that's really how you become successful in any endeavor. And a lot of people think they need to add so much. They need to do so many more things, have more things, try new things. It's like, you need to cut out. You need to cut out and you need to focus on one thing. And you can only do that when it comes down to understanding your values, your goals, and then what's motivating you, which is all interrelated. But it's really just picking the most important thing and hammering that in until you have perfected it. And too often people can't prioritize because they don't have that central point of values.
Not clarity, right? Is what you're talking about.
Yes, clarity. You don't have that clarity because you don't know where you're standing and where to go and how to get there. But once you figure out where you're at, where you want to go and why you want to go there, then you can actually prioritize and you don't get caught up in all the social media bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah, really powerful. It's like, I can hear clarity, commitment, and then there's the optimization piece or the kind of prioritization, right? I kind of, really going, right, this is it. This is what I'm going to go for. So really, really powerful, Josh. I think it's, I'm sat here kind of breathe, exhaling like, okay, cool. I'm doing okay. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm left with. And I really hope the people listening to this are kind of in a similar boat in that if you haven't got all those things, if you haven't, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to get your diet like perfect, and if you
doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah, well, it's who's that guy, the Evernote founder who's spending $1 million a year or $5 million a year, Evan, he's called, or something like that, who's optimizing his health. He spends millions of dollars on it and making everyone doing some great job getting some headlines, and I feel like it's obviously you've got a business startup in the background, which is helping optimize health. And what's really tricky about those that, that not everyone's in that situation in a position to do that, or even motivated to do that either. Right? So
exactly.
He's certainly an extreme case. So, Josh, thanks for making us feel a little bit better this morning about that we're not way off track.
Happy to help.
It's, and yeah, look, absolute pleasure to have you on here. So just so if people want to reach out to you, you've got Strong for Life as a coaching company. What's the best way to reach you, Josh, if they want to kind of reach out and talk further?
If you want to chat, find me on Instagram, Coach Josh Wood, or you can just Google Coach Josh Wood. I show up everywhere. But otherwise, strongforlife.online is the website. There's a bunch of free resources, cookbooks, recipes, all that jazz, and you can always get in contact there.
Awesome. Josh, thanks heaps for being here.
Thanks for having me.